So moving on to Bowling Green, this is another team that kind of made a strange hire in everyone's minds when they went after Scott Loeffler, and then he went after Brian Van Gorder as the defensive coordinator, and they brought in the all 2005 second-tier coaching staff. But this is also a project after Mike Jinks left them with multiple poor seasons. They still have one of the better talent ratings in the conference. I believe they're rated – they have the fourth best talent in the conference, that's obviously good. But last season was also not a great success. Not surprising coming off of where they came from. They did beat Akron. They beat Toledo. But most of the rest of the games were not particularly close. Ohio was somewhat close for 2 quarters, so we get a lot of the clips. They understand they're working with a young team, too, that isn't super talented. They're a step above Akron, particularly in talent, if not coaching. They're in a little bit better situation. I think even administratively they probably are. I know Akron's had to cut some departments recently. They have a somewhat generous schedule. They do have to go to Akron. So they could take last. I think they're still a step above. But we don't know for sure. Offensively, it's tough to call this a spread offense. That's why the term is so – it's vague, and when someone tells you, oh, they run the spread, usually that person doesn't know that much or is heard it from somebody else because, especially in this day and age, every team runs a spread. But Bowling Green really utilizes a lot of different formations to try and get a defense misshifted and then take advantage of that, especially a lot of tight formations. Like the big example that comes up in the NFL game is the Rams and Sean McVay, where they have a lot of tight bunch looks to get DBs mispositioned so they can hit the outside. And Bowling Green does that some. And they typically do it with a power running game, gaps. But like almost every other spread offense today, they do mix in zone. They have a little bit of everything. Here we're going to see them. Simple RPO. And they'll do this a lot too. Have 3 or 4 options on a play and pick the best one. This is Julian Ortega-Jones. He's probably the most talented player they have on offense coming back. They do have a new quarterback. Starter-wise on offense, they return 6. That's lower tier. But here they run power one way and then throw the option the other way. Just hoping you're out of position. Just seeing how Ohio lines up. They are out of position. They have really 2 guys on the DBs. They've got a linebacker matched up with that bubble guy. They only really have 6 in the box. This is a good look for Bowling Green, and they take advantage of it. But they need to be able to do this more often and with better results, obviously, if they want to have success on offense. You're going to see them just run basic QB power. This is another instance where they fake a run one way and then run it inside. And against Ohio's actually lined up pretty well against this. But the quarterback's able to read it and run through. He's able to get a first. Here we're going to see them run counter, which is the opposite of power. Same sort of concept. They're going to fake runway or even option one way and run it the other. Ohio's got a lot of guys in the box, but hopefully they can get Ohio to over-adjust to the jet motion, which they do a fair amount of. They have a fair amount of plays out of the jet series. And here we even see it's a tight formation. They've got 1 wide receiver. They got a tight end and a wing. If they were to run to the jet, they would be able to hope that this running back here can go to the outside, seal the cornerback to the inside in a reach block, and that receiver getting the jet sweep runs it outside. But if the defense over-adjusts, the quarterback can run the counter. And this is also something you don't need a lot of blocking schemes to run a series like this. You could run power or counter, which are inside runs, as the blocking scheme for all of them and still run the ball outside. You're just changing who gets the ball and maybe what the running back and maybe the wing or tight end, depending on what team you are, what they do. And the simpler you can keep it for your offensive line, especially the younger your offensive line, the better your offense is going to be. They already have the toughest job, not just physically, but mentally. If you're a receiver, outside of a run and shoot offense or plays that are stolen from the run and shoot, you're either blocking one guy, blocking the most dangerous guy, or running a preconceived route no matter the defense. You may have to adjust the track or the release depending on whether there's one high safety or two, if the cornerback is pressing or off. I'll talk about this a little bit in the blog post I put up this week about Pro Football Focus. But you have a pretty easy idea of what your assignment's going to be. And unless it's a run and shoot drive play where you have to read the defense, and even in that, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 options at most. With the offensive line, you've got 8 guys to worry about blocking. You don't know how they're going to line up exactly. You don't know how best to attack him. You have to communicate with everyone next to you as to who to block and how, whether you have to double team, whether you need to cut, who's pulling, how you're going to replace. There's so many factors, whereas receiver play is more static. Offensive line play is completely dynamic. It's 5 on 6 or 7 or 8. You might have a running back, you might have a tight end, you might not. But there's so many moving parts that the simpler you can make it on the big uglies, the better for everybody. And that's what Bowling Green's trying to do here. And this white boy goes for a long way. Here we see another tight formation, tight bunch. This time they go zone out of it. And what they're trying to get Ohio to do is over-adjust the bunch. And we see they do. They're a typical 4-3. They shift to the bunch. They bring a safety up, and they go one high, like I talked about with Akron, where a lot of these teams are willing to break their 2-high safety structure, play cover 3, cover 1, or man in order to stop the run. And we see they bring the safety up. Both corners are off. There's the force guy to the backside, the defender designated to force the ball inside. Here would probably be the corner, and he's 7 or 8 yards off the ball, and he has to play man or zone coverage on that number 1 receiver. Bowling Green knows this, and they're going to run to that bubble. And if they were able to get a few more blocks off, they would have had success on that play. Ohio stunts right into the gap. They're not an experienced enough offensive line to pick that up or trade off of it, so Ohio gets a stop. And this time around, we're also going to see they do have a lot of under center stuff. I guess they're diverse, and that, in theory, isn't too hard to put in. You're just changing 1 or 2 people's alignment. You're changing the quarterback, obviously, and then maybe the running back. But it does mess up the timing some. They were able to do it with some success. It's not a big deal, but it is at least half of one more thing to put in there. But as an offensive lineman, it shows your commit. It allows the running back to get downhill in his run, which is more fun for the running back and even more fun for the offensive lineman because you know he's going to hit the gap at full speed and no defender's going to want to tackle him. We see that here. He hits that, puts his foot in the ground and hits the hole quickly, and he's able to score off of it. I also like how they're asking Joe Burrow's dad about stuff in the middle of a MAC game. Here's another simple concept. They're trying to work simple short stuff, kind of similar to Akron because they know they don't really have the talent advantage. They've got younger guys who need simple stuff, and this is stuff they probably ran in high school. I imagine most high school teams have a stick concept, which is where the first receiver runs deep to either run off the corner or find a hole in between the corner and the safety. The second guy runs an out route, and that creates a high-low problem for the defense. A 2-on-1 where the corner either has to go with the deep receiver or trust the safety, get the receiver, and come off against the number 2 guy going into the flat if he doesn't have help from the overhang. And then the third guy will run a hitch to the outside where he's either sitting there or finding the hole in zone defense, or if it's man-to-man, he's going to keep going and try to lose his man. But we see here it opens up beautifully. So he's able to get outside the linebacker, find the hole, and get a first. And that's simple stuff Bowling Green wants to do. Here's another example of the jet series where they're really hoping the Ohio defense over-adjusts. It looks as if they do. The corner goes with the cross. The running back wheel is open enough, and it's good for a gain of a few yards. Well, they're trying to create simple opportunities. that could be as simple as just a simple check. You call your normal play and then H wheel, and the quarterback seeing the tag knows where to look. The running back knows his route. None of the receivers change. None of the offensive line really changes what they do. It's something pretty simple to add. You do have to worry about doing that too much with too many moving parts and not really being good at a few adjustments. Instead, you just have 10,000 kicks you've practiced once instead of 1 or 2 kicks you've practiced 10,000 times, to put it like Bruce Lee would. We're going to see another example of the jet motion. This time they're going to look a little deeper. They're able to hit the middle of the field against pretty bad defense, if we're being honest. But we see the safety crash down. Number 1 crashes down to attack the jet. 6 has to roll back to the middle of the field, and he's not able to get there quick enough. Or he attacks one guy. He attacks one guy crossing the field, but the corner has to take the second guy and is not able to do so well enough. Find a seam of the defense, and they score a touchdown off of it. But we see the problems that creates when a team has to adjust their defense in that way. They have to roll, especially when you're a too high structure, meaning 2 safeties deep. Probably should have clarified that earlier, that you need to bring you either play them both back, or one safety has to come down to take the motion guy. The second one has to drop back, and that leads to potential mismatches on the front and backside. On the backside, they can go where the safety just left and attack that area, or they can overload the side where the safety rolls down and trust that your backside safety rolling into the defensive backfield won't get there fast enough. And they ran that vertical route purposely to distract that rolling safety from getting there in time, number 6. And then they trust that they won't get the tight end or wing in the seam covered by a corner because he's too worried about the motion, or a potential third receiver that runs an out route, as we see. See the tight end right in the seam, distracting the third. It's a touchdown by the running back. And then here we're going to see them. So offensively, it's interesting to see what they do, especially where Scott Loeffler was kind of maligned everywhere he went. Maybe I just read Reddit too much, but it seemed like they really did not like what he was doing. And statistically, they really weren't very good. But you can see what they're trying to do and what they're trying to work with. This isn't a situation where it's obviously going to fail. And like Akron, it's not a 1-year project on offense or defense for that matter, of which they were not bad either. That was interesting. Both Akron and Bowling Green were about 4th and 5th in the defense. I know I said Akron wasn't that great. And they suffer on the same issues Bowling Green did too. They were both 11th and 12th in average leverage index defensively, meaning none of the games they played in were that close with a few exceptions. Even Bowling Green's wins, which were against Toledo and Akron, were not very close. So there's that going for their defensive stats. But they're still fairly sound for the most part. Here we're going to see them basic 4-3. We're going to see they're willing to break the structure. This is interesting. I'm used to seeing the typical cover 3 look where the safety's down and the corner's up. But a lot of times when you split the field in coverage, meaning both sides of the field are not running the same coverage. One side might be in a cover 2, the other in a cover 3. One side might be man, the other cover 3 or cover 1. No, I guess that wouldn't really be split. Or they might be match quarters on one side, man-to-man on the other. And I think that's what Bowling Green is doing here, while they keep 7 in the box versus Ohio's 8 in their own box. See, they're not really able to fill fast enough. And this is just really bad tackling, which is typical of less talented teams. The coaching adage about tackling and all it is effort, it's factual but not true, I would say, in that it does take effort to tackle, but talent allows you to get in the position to tackle and makes your tackle easier. Physically bringing the guy down, if you don't want to or aren't willing to make the effort, obviously you're not going to bring that guy down. But if you're slower and weaker and not smart enough to be in the right position, you're not making the tackle either. So that's where that line of thinking gets it very wrong. And we see defenses like Bowling Green who aren't fast or strong enough or able to get in position quick enough, and it fails them in instances like that. Here we see them adjust to trips. They're still able to, interesting for a 4-3 team, they break the structure and still go one high. And what's really strange to me is seeing the DBs play at the same level. That's pretty rare. Even in quarters defenses, they don't normally do that. But they have 6 in the box to adjust to this trips look and playing over against the running back. Meaning they have the 3 tech, who's the guy playing outside the guard, away from the running back. See them attack the pass. They seem to lock on pretty well. That's not bad coverage at all. Looks like they're playing just man. And not really much there for Ohio. Here we see them 4-3 again, and we see an adjustment. This is typical more of 4-2-5 teams where the defensive end will play what's known as a 7 tech. So when there's a tight end in the formation, the defensive lineman can either line up in a 7, which is inside the tight end, a 6, which is head up, or a 9, which is outside. 4-3 teams will typically run him in a 9 and keep that 7th defender, linebacker, safety inside playing what would be a 70. When you talk about linebackers, you add a 0, and that's the technique. So he'd be a 70, the defensive end would be in a 9. And this is also not universal terminology. It changes. What's one team's 7 is another team's 8. What's one team's 9 is another team's 7. It depends, but this is the terminology I'm used to, so that's what I'm going to use. And we see they have, in this case, the defensive end in a 7. And this is a common adjustment, especially in today's game where it's more spread offenses. It's a little bit more interesting to see it against a 2 tight end formation and how they also don't really adjust by bringing a safety down. It's, in a way, 6 on 9. That's something Ohio is going to want to take advantage of, usually in the running game. We'll see them do it here. They just have too many guys at the point of attack. The 7 tech's almost able to make a play, but that's because they're looping up the tight end. Get that outside guy for a cutback. Well, it's kind of an interesting adjustment and one. It's interesting, but I'm not sure it's effective. And that's not even the main problem with the play. The main problem is the other side where they don't have enough guys to defend a run. There's 7 offensive linemen. And especially if you option a defensive lineman, there's really only 6 to defend that. And that's a numbers game a team like Ohio is going to wants you to play, especially when they are the better team. Then here we're going to see a different package. They go some sort of bear front, maybe a 3-3 or like a 5-1. And they're going to play back. They don't really think. They're just trying to do something different. I imagine it's the first quarter. Ohio's already put up 17 points. They're grasping at straws. So they're just trying something different. To be fair, Bowling Green's stats weren't bad, but this was probably their worst game. I believe they gave up 62 points. But I'm mostly doing this just to show the structure of what they do. To give it an idea of how good a team is in 10 minutes of clips is a little bit hard. You can see it some, but mostly just want to convey what they want to do. And here we just see another package. And the multi-package approach can work for some smarter teams, but with young teams, it usually just leads to a bunch of bad packages. And we're going to see them have a coverage mix-up here. They send 6. They aren't able to peel enough, and the DB is left all alone. So that's Bowling Green. And I guess from Van Gorder's perspective, at least he wasn't playing a Paul Johnson team. But defensively, they weren't bad. They returned 6 on each side of the ball. I know I said this earlier. They return vamping 6 on each side of the ball. Right again, as always. They can take a step up this season. Their schedule is not as friendly as last season, so they could still have 3 wins. People can malign them, but they could still be improved. They have Robert Morris at home. That's a win. I could see them knocking off maybe one of the big guys. I wouldn't put money on that. They could take out Kent State at home. They could win at Akron. And maybe they surprise Liberty. But I think they're still a 3-win team that is a multi-year build. They're still a step above Akron, but not appreciably so.